Welcome to Vision Front Insights, the AI-powered CV Validator PRO. In this demo, what you are seeing is not simply a resume viewer or a keyword scanner. It is a structured hiring intelligence workflow built to help recruiting teams move from volume to clarity. In this scenario, the use case is a senior full-stack developer search, and the goal is straightforward. Take a mixed batch of incoming CVs, evaluate them against explicit criteria, and surface the strongest prospects with evidence. As we move through the video, I'd like you to watch for one core theme. This workflow does not just speed up screening, it makes the screening process more consistent, more explainable, and more usable for real hiring decisions. The first thing to notice is that the role is defined before scoring begins. We are not asking the system to guess what a good candidate looks like. We provide the job description, we add hard constraints, and we make the decision rules visible up front. In this example, those rules include required years of experience, specific framework exposure, degree expectations, and alignment with technologies such as Python, Next.js, Fast API, database tooling, and modern deployment practices. That matters because a trustworthy hiring workflow starts with transparent criteria. If the input standard is clear, the output becomes easier to defend to a recruiter, to a hiring manager, and ultimately to a client. The first thing to notice is that the role is defined before scoring begins. We are not asking the system to guess what a good candidate looks like. We provide the job description. We add hard constraints, and we make the decision rules visible up front. In this example, those rules include required years of experience, specific framework exposure, degree expectations, and alignment with technologies such as Python, Next.js, Fast API, database tooling, and modern deployment practices. That matters because a trustworthy hiring workflow starts with transparent criteria. If the input standard is clear, the output becomes easier to defend to a recruiter, to a hiring manager, and ultimately to a client. From this point, the visual remains on processing for an extended stretch, and that is actually useful for narration, because it gives us room to explain what happens under the hood. This stage is where the platform reads the candidate batch, extracts structured information from otherwise inconsistent CV formats, and maps that information into a common evaluation frame. In simple terms, it is translating many different writing styles into one decision model so the hiring team can compare candidates on like-for-like criteria. Rather than forcing a recruiter to manually normalize titles, skills, education entries, and project descriptions, the system does that machine work first. That reduces noise. It also creates a far more stable base for ranking, because candidates are being compared against the same definition of the role rather than against the personal reading habits of whoever opens the PDF first. A second layer of value here is rule-based interpretation. The platform is not only collecting keywords, it is checking evidence against the requirements that were defined earlier. So, if the brief asks for senior-level, full-time software experience, the workflow can separate that from internships, student work, or loosely related project exposure. If the role depends on both Python and Next.js, those signals can be assessed together rather than treated as isolated skill mentions. If the position requires a completed bachelor's degree, an ongoing degree can be surfaced differently from a completed one. That distinction is critical in real recruiting because many systems are good at collecting data but weak at interpreting it. This workflow is stronger because it turns raw CV content into role-specific hiring logic. The client message at this stage is not just automation, it is disciplined automation with role-level context. This long processing segment is also the right place to explain confidence, verification, and explainability. In strong hiring systems, a score on its own is never enough. Teams need to know why a candidate rises, why a candidate falls, and where uncertainty still exists. That is why the later screens matter so much. They do not stop at a ranking. They present match indicators, credibility signals, component-level breakdowns, and flags that can trigger manual follow-up. In other words, the product is designed to support human judgment, not replace it. For a recruiter, that means faster triage. For a hiring manager, it means a better shortlist. And for a client, it means decisions can be reviewed and defended with visible reasoning instead of vague intuition. That balance between speed and auditability is one of the strongest themes in the entire demo. One final point before the results appear. Notice how the process is framed as intelligence rather than simple screening. Screening can sound blunt, narrow, and binary. Intelligence suggests context, prioritization, and evidence. That distinction is worth emphasizing because it changes how the viewer interprets the rest of the demo. We are not looking at a yes or no gate. We are looking at a decision support layer that helps a team navigate volume with more structure and more confidence. Now, the first results come into view. We can see a scoring leaderboard, ranked candidates, visible percentage scores, skill tags, and an immediate written snapshot for the selected profile. Two things stand out right away. First, the scores are not artificially inflated. Even the strongest profile in this particular batch is only a partial match, and that honesty makes the output more believable. Second, the system starts explaining itself immediately. The selected candidate summary does not merely report a number. It describes why the match is weak, where critical requirements are missing, and which constraints are driving the outcome. For a client, that is a very strong proof point. The platform is not just sorting applicants. It is turning a surface-level ranking into an explainable recommendation. Now the first results come into view. We can see a scoring leaderboard, ranked candidates, visible percentage scores, skill tags, and an immediate written snapshot for the selected profile. Two things stand out right away. First, the scores are not artificially inflated. Even the strongest profile in this particular batch is only a partial match, and that honesty makes the output more believable. Second, the system starts explaining itself immediately. The selected candidate summary does not merely report a number. It describes why the match is weak, where critical requirements are missing, and which constraints are driving the outcome. For a client, that is a very strong proof point. The platform is not just sorting applicants. It is turning a surface-level ranking into an explainable recommendation. Here the platform presents a full candidate report with an overall score, a separate job description match, credibility indicators, context signals, and component-level scoring. This is one of the most client-ready screens in the video because it shows that matching is multidimensional. A candidate can score well on skills, but weakly on experience. A profile can align on keywords yet still raise credibility questions. A resume can be well-structured and readable while still missing the role's hard constraints. By separating those dimensions, the platform avoids the common trap of collapsing a complex hiring decision into one vanity number. It gives the team a more nuanced way to discuss fit. It also creates a much better foundation for collaborative hiring. because different stakeholders can understand which part of the profile is strong, which part is weak, and which part requires follow-up. The next set of screens shows verification in practice. Beginning with education, we move into a credential view where an academic qualification is marked as ongoing and labeled as a likely match rather than as a fully completed, fully verified degree. From there, the reviewer can jump into LinkedIn verification or launch a manual web search. That is a subtle but extremely important capability. Good hiring systems should automate the obvious, but they should also surface uncertainty rather than hide it. When evidence is incomplete, ambiguous, or only partially corroborated, the right next step is not false certainty. The right next step is guided review. In a client conversation, this is where you can underline that the product is designed to reduce careless automation. It accelerates decision-making while still preserving human oversight where the stakes are higher. We then see certification checks, additional supporting evidence, and shortly after that, a generated interview report. This is where the demo expands beyond screening into workflow acceleration. The same evidence used for ranking can now be converted into structured interview intelligence. A concise candidate summary, context-aware observations, and targeted follow-up questions. That matters because the platform is no longer answering only one question, which is who should we review? It is now helping with the next question as well, which is how should we interview? For a recruiting team, that shortens cycle time. For a client, it improves consistency across interviewers. And for a hiring manager, it makes the handoff from screening to structured conversation far smoother. The result is a tighter workflow from intake to shortlist to interview preparation. When we return to the main results, the broader value of the leaderboard becomes even clearer. We are not just reviewing one profile in isolation. We are comparing multiple candidates against a shared benchmark and moving between summaries, evidence, and deeper analysis. That is especially helpful for team-based hiring because it creates a common decision frame. Recruiters, hiring managers, and client stakeholders can discuss the same structured outputs rather than relying on separate personal notes and memory. This kind of consistency is often underestimated. In practice, it is what turns a smart tool into a useful process. It reduces rework, shortens review meetings, and makes it easier to explain why one candidate advances while another does not. Another candidate view highlights an important edge case. Not every credential or claim should be treated as automatically validated. In this profile, a certification is routed to manual review, while adjacent sections still surface useful signals such as skills and language information. That balance is exactly what you want in a mature hiring platform. The system does not pretend that every ambiguous item can be resolved instantly. Instead, it preserves momentum by showing what is known, flagging what is uncertain, and creating a clear route for follow-up. For a client audience, this is particularly reassuring because it shows restraint. The product is not overselling certainty. It is showing disciplined triage, where clear data moves quickly and questionable data is handled visibly and responsibly. As we move farther down the leaderboard, we begin to see lower-ranked candidates, including profiles with 0% scores or minimal relevant skill alignment. That may look severe, but for a hiring team, it is one of the most valuable outcomes in the demo. Clear non-matches save recruiter hours, reduce unnecessary interviews, and protect client confidence in the shortlist. A strong platform should not only celebrate top candidates, it should also make disqualification transparent. That is how teams avoid spending attention on resumes that simply do not satisfy the brief. And just as importantly, it gives the client a visible rationale for why certain candidates are excluded. In many real-world hiring processes, speed is lost not because no one can identify a good candidate, but because too much time is spent debating weak ones. This view addresses exactly that problem. In THE final segment, we open a stronger candidate report and the narrative becomes more nuanced. We see a higher overall score, detailed score breakdowns, contact and credibility signals, and verified experience entries with source links. Then the system does something especially valuable. It raises risk alerts even for a strong profile. Future dated claims, timeline inconsistencies, or overlapping experience and education are surfaced clearly rather than buried under a favorable headline number. That is a very important design choice. Mature hiring support does not reward strength by suppressing caution. It shows both at the same time. The profile may still be strong, but the viewer is told exactly where to probe. That makes the downstream interview sharper and fairer. It also demonstrates that the platform's credibility comes not from flattering outputs, but from transparent judgment, evidence-backed verification, and a willingness to highlight risk where risk exists. So, if we step back from the screens and summarize the full journey, the story is clear. We start with explicit hiring criteria. We process a real candidate batch at scale. We produce ranked outputs with reasons, not just scores. We verify claims through evidence and guided review. And we finish with usable artifacts that support screening, interview preparation, and final decision-making. For teams that need hiring to move faster without becoming less rigorous. That is the real promise of this workflow. It is not simply about automation. It is about bringing structure, consistency, and defensible judgment into one place. Thank you.